American family is what keeps American psychotherapy alive and well. And this is a cauldron for the production of neurosis and, in some cases, little else. So, part of what psychedelics do is they decondition you from cultural values. This is what makes it such a political hot potato. If there's anything, since all culture is a kind of con game, the most dangerous candy you can hand out is candy which causes people to start questioning the rules of the game. So you can have a Stalinist state, a parliamentary democracy, and a theocratic state, and they all can agree on one thing, that psychedelics are just terrible because, then citizens start asking all kinds of hard questions, and the devotion to the values of the fatherland become mired in pseudo-intellectual discourse, and the next thing you know, somebody has to be shipped off to the camps in order to right the situation. Oh yeah, no, it definitely works in the personal life. Like I've been building a house in Hawaii, and while I've been building it, I've definitely cut back my intake of psychedelics because I don't want the answer to the question, is this a good idea, until it's too late to do anything about it. It's like St. Augustine's prayer, God grant me chastity and continence, but not yet. Yeah. Well, all this raises a lot of stuff, most of which I can't remember because of my devotion to cannabis. But let's go back to the thing about language and yeah, the origins of language. Let's talk about that for a minute. I think that I've been thinking about this because I've been writing about it, and here's what I've come up with. Part of what makes it difficult for us to think about language clearly in English is that this word language is used by us to mean spoken language, and it also means the general class of linguistic activity, as in computer language, body language, so forth and so on. And to think clearly about language, we need to have a clear distinction between spoken language and the general syntactical organization of reality. Language. Because that is old. Honeybees do it, dolphins do it, termites do it, they all do it different ways, octopi do it. There is much of language in nature. In fact, you could argue that all of nature is a linguistic enterprise because the DNA essentially is a symbolic system. Those codons which code for protein are arbitrarily assigned, in other words by convention. There is no chemical relationship between the codons and the proteins they code for any more than there is a relationship between an English word and the thing it intends. Those are just conventionalized by probability over time. So language is deep in nature. What is not deep in nature is speech. Speech is as artificial as the water wheel, the bicycle pump, the Tesla coil, and the space shuttle. Somebody figured this out somewhere. Well, so then people say, well, but this is hard to understand. It's hard to picture how it could happen. Well, here's how I think it happened. My little example about the songs earlier was a stab at this, but here's more. It's that all non-genetic behaviors, which are called, reasonably enough, epigenetic behaviors, are nevertheless, they're not simply expressions of free will. they are under the control of a looser system of rules than the genetic rules, which are chemical and absolute. The epigenetic behaviors are under the control of syntactical constraints. In other words, we need to expand the concept of syntax from the rules which govern the grammar of a spoken language to the rules which govern the behavior of any complex system. So, for example, before speech among human beings, I think it was probably very touchy-feely. If you watch monkeys, you see this. They touch each other. They stroke, they grunt, they groom, they goose, they push, they do all of these things. The repertoire of this kind of behavior, if you're good at it, may be on the order of having 4,000 or 5,000 words in your vocabulary. Well, when we watch primates do this kind of behavior, we don't think of it as a language, but in fact it is. It's a gestural language. A couple of years ago, some research was done where these people took pre-verbal infants and they taught them standard American Sign Language before they could speak. So these little tiny children could sign, pick me up, please change me, where is Daddy, I'm hungry, I want to watch TV, before they could ever utter a word. Well, now what we're always told about spoken language is it's this miracle and that we're genetically hardwired for it. Well, these experiments seem to imply we're even more genetically hardwired for standard American Sign Language, which is something very few of us will ever learn to use. What does this mean? Well, it means that the gestural capacity is deeper than the ability to verbalize, and hence probably older. So I think there was a gestural language as complex as standard English, probably, in place before anyone ever uttered a word. Now, what the psychedelics seem to suggest is that you can get so hyped up on tryptamines that your body goes into some kind of almost convulsive shock, and the normally acoustically modulated processing of language flows over into the voice box, and you begin to literally articulate syntax. You begin to make a noise which is a tracking noise for this ongoing syntactical stuff that's organizing gestural intent. And it's like going from carving in stone to color TV. Your listener immediately transfers loyalty to this much more spectacular form of behavior. And so it's like literally that the word burst forth full-blown based on a platform of gestural syntax that had been maybe millions of years in its formation. It was just this ability to redirect the energy of syntactical intent through the body, so that instead of coming out at the end of the fingers, it came out at the end of the tongue, flapping in the airstream, and this thing happened. It's amazing to me that the straight linguists, if you go to an academic university and study linguistics, will teach you that language is no more than 35 to 40,000 years old. I mean, that's like yesterday. I mean, fire is 500,000 years. Chipped flint, 1.5 million years. Language, 35,000 years old. Language is everything we are, everything we do. You can't think without it. You can't do anything without it. And yet, if it's that new, then what it represents is simply a technology, a form of media that squeezed out other forms of media. And it's not hard to see why. After all, it works in the dark. That's good. It allows politics. You can make speeches to large groups of people. And it's